В Вашингтоне сказали вам, что ваш патриотический долг ненавидеть Владимира Путина. Многие американцы подчинились этой директиве. Ненависть к Путину стала центральной целью внешней политики Америки. Очень скоро эта ненависть может привести США к конфликту в Восточной Европе.
Почти так же, как военнослужащий ВСУ на репортера Fox News, на своих коллег срывается ведущий этого канала Такер Карлсон, а заодно и на всю администрацию Байдена.
Какие же мерзкие эти люди. И, конечно же, они продвигают войну, а не поддержку демократии. Украина не демократия, никогда ею не была. Это сателлит администрации Байдена.
So what is NATO and what is the purpose of NATO since the fall of the Soviet Union 30 years ago that NATO was designed as a bulwark against? Well, no one can answer that question, not one person. Imagine how we would feel if Mexico and Canada became satellites of China. Why do I care what's going on in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia? And I'm serious. Like, why do I care? And why shouldn't I root for Russia, which I am? Because
Hello everybody, it's Jeff. I hope everybody's doing okay today. Got sort of a cloudy day today here. A little bit windy too. Boy, it was windy yesterday though, God almighty. We had, in some parts of the state, it was like 50-mile-an-hour gusts out there. It's like almost hurricane force. And I've been through a hurricane before, I'll tell you. And yeah, the winds are a lot stronger, but boy, you know, when you hear those 50-mile-an-hour gusts hitting the side of your building here, geez, it sounds like a train hitting it. Which is, you know, what took all the friggin' siding off the first time, right? It just ripped it right off. And so far the siding is holding on, okay? It's holding on. Nothing's blown off yet, but there are some shingles from the roof down on the ground outside, so apparently that's going to have to be something they're going to have to contend with here at some point. So, I see here that there was a guy in China, an American, who was sentenced to death for killing his ex-girlfriend. They had a fight or a squabble over breaking up back in 2019, which is like 20, you know, and it ended in murder. So I mean, and his ex-girlfriend was 21 years old. So I don't know. I mean, I've noticed recently, you know, last month or so, there's been a lot of murders popping up on the news here of people who have broken up or are breaking up, and it's because of that you know, they killed you know, whoever in the relationship. And I'm thinking, you know, maybe people need to take like a course in how to deal with breakups. You know, because it seems to me like people these days are really selfish in their attitude, because I think it's selfishness that drives people to murder their ex-spouse or whatever, because they figure they own that person, and if they own that person, then they have a right to dump him, or take him back, or take her back whenever they feel like it. Okay, what people need to understand is when you break up, you break up. Okay, there's a reason you did it in the first place. Okay, and just because at first it seemed like it was right because you guys were, you know, sexually insane at the time you did it, but now that's over, because that doesn't last through the whole thing, right? You get 6-7 months of that, and then all of a sudden it peters out. Okay, so when that happens and you guys are actually dealing with each other as, you know, in reality, okay, you're actually seeing each other for who you are, and you can't deal with that, then a breakup is imminent. And when it happens for a reason. You just weren't compatible. I mean, everybody's compatible sexuality-wise, you know what I'm saying? Everyone, okay? And like I said, it does fade away after a time, okay? Once you've wore each other out, okay? So, what happened is that, you know, people today, you know, they think that the relationship, when it starts off like that, should stay like that all the time. But I don't know where they get this idea from, but that's not true. Okay, it's not true. Hollywood likes to make it out to be true. Books like to make it out to be true, but that's just fiction. For the most part, that's lies. You know, people always like to have fairy tale images of what life should be, but not what it is. Okay, that's the reason why we escape into movies and books and stuff. Okay, because we want to live in a world where things are perfect, or at least better than where we are now. Okay, and we get the wrong idea about how relationships are, and I think it hits us when we're young. I mean, you know, because I think as we watch television when we're growing up, as we read books when we're growing up, it's almost ingrained in us that, you know, a relationship begins, you know, in a steamy thing, and it stays that way through, you know, until you're dead. But you ask anybody that's actually been in a real relationship, they'll tell you no. No, it doesn't. You always have to have a new partner in order to maintain that level of a relationship, you know, in that first period of when you start. Okay, after that's over, if you want it to come back, you have to find somebody else, because that person's been used up, and you're not going to be thinking about that person in that way anymore. Okay, that's just human nature. Okay, so a lot of people, when they break up and they can't find anybody else to replace what they had, they try to go back and reclaim what was theirs, or they claim what was theirs. You know what I'm saying? Try to reclaim the past, and the people often have moved on, or they just they're not interested in repeating mistakes. And some folks can't take that, you know, because they've been taught all their life that they're supposed to, when you claim somebody, that's yours for life, no matter if you want them or not. Okay, that they're supposed to come back to you. You know, maybe that's what it is. I don't know, but I think there's a lot of selfishness behind that drives people to do these kind of crimes. You know, they got like a TV show on, I can't remember what channel it is. It's like they do crime shows on there. And they have this show where people that were in relationships, how they end in murder and stuff like that. It's like every episode is about some kind of relationship that ended in murder. And it always seems to play out roughly the same way. Like the person wants to take somebody back after they broke up. You know, it could have been as many as 5-6 years ago. All right. And then they find out the other person has moved on. So they either kill the person they broke up with, or they kill the person who's dating the person that they broke up with. You know what I'm saying? So there's always this selfish reaction. Okay. And it seems like we need to educate ourselves a lot better when it comes to relationships. And maybe, you know, we need to start when kids are young. Okay, because I think when you get the mind when it's young and still forming, and let them know, especially when they have their first crush, how to deal with it better. We really need to stay on top of that, because I think that's really important. Because, you know, a kid's first crush is sort of a really fundamental foundation making or breaking situation. We can't just giggle it off like, oh, it's just little kids. No, it's important to them, because everything growing up when you're young is a big important thing, because it's the first time, right? Everything's the first time. Okay, but for, you know, people that are older, it's like, you know, it's like big deal. Okay, because we've been through it all, you know. But we have to take these things serious. Okay, and I think a lot of parents today don't take these situations serious enough. They just brush it off because they don't want to talk about it. They don't have the time to talk about it. It's too personal, you know, and they just, I don't know. But you know, if you don't challenge your preconceptions about life, they're going to challenge you. So you have to embrace what you cannot stand if you want to be a parent. You know, if you want to talk about something, you better deal with that before you become a parent, because it's going to get thrown in your face when you're raising a kid. Right? Let's see, what else here? Oh yeah, this thing about Marjorie Taylor Greene. Oh boy, you ought to make a Muppet out of her. She's really that kind of a person. She'd make a good Muppet character to laugh at. From Rolling Stone, Marjorie Taylor Greene is terrified of the media watching her testify under oath. Oh, really? Written by Ryan Bort. Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to appear in court on Friday. The media will be there too, and she's furious about it. U.S. District Court Judge Amy Tottenberg ruled earlier this week that an effort to disqualify the conspiracy theorist from running for re-election over her alleged role in the attack on the Capitol last January the 6th can proceed. The group who filed the challenge, Free Speech for People, is alleging that Greene is in violation of the 14th Amendment, which states that if someone took an oath to defend the Constitution and then, quote, engaged in insurrection or rebellion, unquote, they can't serve in Congress. Tottenberg's decision means Greene will have to testify under oath on Friday. Greene seems a little worried, perhaps because she built her entire career on pushing lies and unfounded conspiracy theories, from Jewish-funded space lasers starting the California wildfires to the 2020 election being stolen. And it has little experience telling the truth, which she'll now have to do, at least she opened herself up to perjury charges. Well, that's going to be interesting, because if she lies so goddamn much, she takes the oath, that Bible's probably going to burn in her hand when she's, you know. So they better keep an eye on that. Quote, you want to talk about it? It's a big lie, unquote, she said recently on One America News, which is a Republican news station. I don't know if everybody gets that. I don't get it, but it's like Fox News times 2. Quote, they want to talk about the big lie. This is the big lie, and it's destroying democracy, unquote. Like she gives two shits about democracy. Her being part of the January 6th thing just shows how much she really loves democracy. Okay? Greene grew even more animated about the media presence in the courtroom. Quote, I really hope you guys get a camera in that courtroom, unquote, she continued. Quote, you know what the Democrats and the media are going to do? They're going to click and cut and paste so they could sell a lie on their networks every night, unquote. Well, I think she's talking about Fox. So I'm not sure if she realizes what station that she's attacking here. Greene talking about, quote, destroying democracy, quote, is pretty rich. Rolling Stone reported last fall that Greene was one of several lawmakers who participated in the planning of the Stop the Steal rally that preceded the riot at the Capitol. She's since valorized those who stormed the Capitol in an attempt to stop the certification of the 2020 election results. Quote, if you think about what our Declaration of Independence says, it says to overthrow tyrants, unquote, she said in October. Yeah, overthrow tyrants, okay, which we did using the election system. We overthrew a tyrant and we got Biden, okay? Somehow she must have slept through all those 4 years and didn't realize who the tyrant was. Greene made the same argument against the media's presence in the courtroom on the Janice Elias show, hosted by Trump's former election attorney. Yeah, that's going to really be honest to... Quote, it's absurd what they're claiming and lying about, unquote, she said on Tuesday. Quote, they're going to allow the press in the courtroom. They're going to allow the whole thing to be videoed live. You know what that's going to look like. The Democrats and the nasty mainstream media are going to be able to twist and turn and clip out any little piece they want, unquote. Well, let's see. Why don't we sell tickets so people can witness the whole thing as it's happening? That way they can tell you whether or not something's been clipped, pasted, or edited, okay? So if Marjorie Taylor Greene insists on it, maybe we can get some people from the outside to come and watch this thing play out. You know, she thinks she's nervous now. Wait till the people show up and start watching her wiggle her way out of the truth here. Greene tried to block the effort to get her booted from the ballot earlier this month, arguing that the move is unconstitutional while vigorously denying that she aided and engaged in insurrection. That's oh boy, crazy coming out of her mouth. Judge Tottenberg didn't buy it. Quote, this case involves a whirlpool of colliding constitutional interests of public import, unquote, the judge, who was appointed by President Obama, wrote. Quote, the novelty of the factual and historical posture of this case, especially when assessed in the context of a preliminary injunction motion reviewed on a fast track, has made resolution of the complex legal issues at stake here particularly demanding, unquote. U.S. District Court Judge Richard Myers II, who was appointed by Trump last week, ruled in favor of Madison Cawthorn as the North Carolina representative moved to block a similar effort to disqualify him from Congress for his alleged involvement in the events of last January the 6th. Cawthorn, like Green, was mentioned in Rolling Stone's report, but about the organization of the rally that preceded the riot. Green wasn't as lucky as Cawthorn, but it will likely be hard to prove that she or any of the other lawmakers who may have helped incite the riot actually violated the 14th Amendment, even though the evidence against Green in particular is pretty copious. Regardless, Friday's testimony could be illuminating. Up to this point, Green has been free to peddle lies and infinitum, and because Republican leadership doesn't seem to care, the only real consequences she faced has been getting banned from Twitter. She'll now have to speak not only under the specter of media scrutiny, but of perjury charges. And believe me, it's going to be very hard for her to speak the truth. So I would have the forms all set and ready on the desk for perjury while she's talking, because I can guarantee you she's going to lie. A person that lies like that all the time is never going to stop. I don't care how many Bibles you put your hand on. She doesn't give a shit about the oath. And this is supposed to be people who are Christian concerned, okay? People in the Christian community, and yet when they put their hand on the good book, they just assume burn it as look at it. So, she's really a friggin' nut. This crazy. I don't understand how people can even believe what she says. Jewish space lasers, Christ almighty. She ought to be ashamed of herself. She ought to be, but I don't think she could. I think she loves herself too damn much to be ashamed of herself. She thinks the world that she's great, She deserves to be fawned over like some kind of a celebrity. When she opens her yap, she expects the world to stop moving. Every day she's on the floor, sitting there screaming her bloody head off, about things that, frankly, aren't even issues that the United States needs to contend with, but she makes it an issue that the Democrats have to talk about because she won't shut up about it, So, let's see, what else here? Maybe stop deleting records. Boy, out of every article I see on here, there's always one. Every other one seems to be about some political figure doing something corrupting, And then there's Mike Lindell. That guy's an idiot. I don't know why the media keeps talking about him, but he's a nobody now. Let's see, Ethiopians queue up for Russia's fight. Oh, you got Ethiopians now that want to fight Russia and Ukraine. That's interesting. You see, Russia's not a very popular country right now, thanks to their leader. You see what happens when leaders go bad and they start doing things other people don't like? The world gangs up on you. That's why it's important for people to understand when you're voting for a president, you better make goddamn sure you're not voting for a clown or a tyrant. Or some dimwit that doesn't understand his right from his left. Okay, you need to put somebody in there that has intelligence, has some political experience, and knows how to deal with other nations. To be sort of an ambassador, if you will. It doesn't matter if the person can really speak well in a crowd. Okay, everybody gets tantalized by that, but that's not the only factor involved. And you have to know their sincerity. I mean, are they honest? Are they really going to do what they say they're going to do? Look at their history, okay? Take a look at what they've done in order to know what they might do, okay? People often just go on the surface. I mean, is he good looking? Is she good looking? Does she have a good voice? Does she not have a good voice? You know what I'm saying? I mean, I think in a lot of ways that's probably how Sarah Palin got as far as she did. First, she gets picked by McCain as a running mate. And then second, the Republican men all thought she was something there to go after, go chase, you know, at a bar somewhere, okay? But her brain, it just wasn't there, okay? There was no brain. And the fact that she's still somebody that Republicans reach out to be inspired by just goes to show you, you know, just how empty and soulless the Republican Party is. That they will reach for the mundane, you know, and the twisted people, depraved people, because they look good or they sound good, you know, just, you know, for that reason alone. You know, as long as they utter the, you know, the phrases, you know, I'm against abortion, you know, I'm a Christian conservative. As long as they, you know, as they repeat these, parrot these things out every now and then when they talk, that's okay. Okay, that makes the Republicans feel confident and secure in voting for that person, as long as they spit that out every now and then. Okay, even though they're being led by the nose off a cliff. Finland and Sweden moving toward possible NATO membership. I think I mentioned that yesterday. Those two countries, they're scared. You know, because what they see Putin doing, you know, it gives them reason to want to be concerned about their own countries. You know, that's why I'm saying, you know, this is eventually going to become the United States versus Russia. No matter what happens in Ukraine, win or lose, eventually we're going to be butting heads with that country. It's coming. Which is why I say, you know, when they were talking about whether or not to put a no-fly zone over Ukraine, it was like, well, you can pay the piper now or you can pay the piper later, but eventually we are going to be going up against Russia, okay? So our military should be prepared for that. It's coming, you know, because Russia's not going to quit. And if they go after a NATO nation, we are going to be the front line in that attack against Putin there. Hopefully, like I said in the last video, the people in his cabal of politicians or what have you, that's what you want to call them, will be scared, too scared to want to take on the United States, and they'll plot to overthrow Putin. You know, but we have to be tough, and we got to show them that they're coming to their end. You know, if they try to overstep and take on a NATO nation, it's going to have dire consequences for them, and they need to know that. I mean, screw trying to convince Putin, okay? We have to send a message to the people around Putin that, look, if you're having second thoughts about what Putin is doing, we're going to put you against the wall, and you're going to be the one that's going to have to decide whether you save the world from a nuclear war or not. You know, who's more important to you? You know, your life or or the clown that's dragging you off the end of a cliff here? I mean, that's what we're going to have to do to them. You know. Okay, how much time do we got? Okay, let's see. Here's an article here. This was written today from Reuters, entitled "Leader of Push to Fund Trump's Border Wall Pleads Guilty to Fraud Tax Charges." No big surprise there, right? Anybody associated with Trump is going to be breaking the law somewhere, okay? Because it's like somebody said, Trump is more of a mob boss than he was a president. He runs his friggin' organization like a mafia, okay? This was written by Luke Cohen, a decorated U.S. Air Force veteran who helped lead a fundraising campaign to build former President Donald Trump's promised wall along the U.S.-Mexican border pleaded guilty on Thursday to conspiring to defraud donors. Federal prosecutors in Manhattan said Brian Kolfage told prospective donors he would, quote, not take a penny, unquote, as he raised more than $25 million for the, quote, We Build the Wall, unquote. Oh, how original. We build the wall. Yet took more than $350,000 and spent money on a boat, a luxury SUV, a golf cart, jewelry, and cosmetic surgery. Jesus Christ! Kolfage, who also pleaded guilty to 3 tax charges, created the private campaign in December 2018, 14 years after losing his legs and right hand in a rocket attack in Iraq. The Miramar Beach, Florida resident had led the fundraising push alongside former Trump advisor Steve Bannon, who was also charged in August 2020. Bannon's case was dismissed after Trump granted him a presidential pardon during the final hours of his presidency. At a remote hearing on Thursday, Kolfage said he told potential donors that their money would be used exclusively to build a wall, but instead kept a large sum for himself and concealed it from the authorities to avoid paying taxes. Quote, I knew what I was doing was wrong and a crime, unquote, Kolfage told U.S. District Judge Annalisa Torres. A co-defendant, Andrew Badolato, also pleaded guilty to wire fraud conspiracy on Thursday. Kolfage could face 4.5 to 5.25 years in prison under recommended federal guidelines, while Badolato faces 41 to 51 months. Sentencing for both were scheduled for September. The final defendant, Timothy Shea, has pleaded not guilty. His lawyer said this month that Shea would exercise, quote, his constitutional right to a fair trial, unquote. In a separate case, Bannon was charged in November with 2 counts of contempt of Congress for defying a subpoena issued by a committee investigating the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol by Trump supporters. Bannon has pleaded not guilty to the misdemeanor counts. So, Jesus, I mean, here's a guy, a veteran, Air Force veteran, who lost limbs, for Christ's sake, in Iraq, comes home, everybody thinks he's a big patriot and all that shit, okay, and what's he do? He steals a whole shitload of money, and he buys all this crap in cosmetic surgery, you know, just so he wouldn't have to pay taxes, you know. I mean, it goes to show you, I mean, not every veteran you meet is a, what do you call it, a patriotic, honest-to-goodness American, okay? So people need to, you know, beware of that when you see somebody walking around, you know, that's, you know, looks like a veteran and stuff, just remember that person's still a human being. Yeah, they went through hell wherever they were in the military. That doesn't mean they're not incapable of committing crimes, okay? They can still do that, and just keep that in mind. You know, it's a, you know, if you can't trust a priest, how can you trust anybody? How many priests have we caught, you know, doing shit with little kids and stuff like that? Okay, if you can't trust them, then, you know, how can you trust anybody you meet these days? You know, you're better off being safe and just judge each person as you meet them, but get to know them first before you know, levy any praise or anything like that on them for things they might have done. Okay. I mean, it kind of irks me a bit when total strangers come up to me and say, thank you for your service. I don't know them. They don't know me, okay? If they knew me, they probably wouldn't even bother coming up to me and saying that anyway. A lot of people that I knew don't, so... and I have no idea why. Sometimes, you know, it's just because they can't stand my sense of humor, I guess. I don't know. But some people, you know, they just, they try to be nice and do this stuff, but, you know, save it for the memorials. Go to the wall or something like that and tell those people, thank you for your service, okay? Don't come to me and say that. You know, I understand why they do it, but I think they, sometimes that's kind of misplaced, depending on who you meet. Anyway, let's go to a commercial, and then we'll come back here and we'll talk some more about other things here. Hit it.
Dear CEO, what's it gonna take for you to do something? Yeah, do you even care?
Climate change affects all of us.
This is your chance to do something good.
It doesn't matter what comes, fresh goes better in life. With Mentos fresh and full of life, nothing gets to you. Staying fresh, staying cool. With Mentos fresh and full of life, fresh goes better. Mentos fresh and fresh goes better with Mentos fresh and full of life.
Mentos, the
Want to build a super day? Then start with the one great taste that makes a super bowl of cereal. Kellogg's Corn Flakes.
Just think of crispy golden flakes.
Delicious, crunchy flakes of corn.
So pure and simple, just can't wait.
Low in sugar, loaded with vitamins and iron.
So good for you, don't hesitate.
For a super bowl of our most nutritious corn flakes ever.
What a super bowl. Have yourself a super bowl. Kellogg's Corn Flakes. Super taste, super good. Kellogg's Corn Flakes.
Be a part of the entertainment value of a lifetime.
I loved it.
It was the best performance I've seen in a lifetime.
I loved the show. I liked it very much. He's a very entertaining man. It's well worth the money.
Now appearing in Charlottetown, coming to Halifax November 6th to the 18th, and St. John November 20th through the 26th.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. So, a lot of mass shootings recently across the country, and people, I hear talking about it, trying to figure out why, what sparked it all. So here's an article here written in Yahoo News, written by Garen Flowers. And it's entitled "Mass Shootings Across U.S. Highlight Surge in Deadly Gun Violence." At least 10 mass shootings rocked the U.S. during Easter weekend this year, a sign that gun violence continues to soar across the country after hitting a high during the first year of the pandemic. In Pittsburgh, 2 high school students were shot dead and at least 8 others were injured at a house party on Sunday. The day before, at a mall in Columbia, South Carolina, 10 people were shot and 2 others were injured after at least one person opened fire. These shootings rounded out a holiday weekend that left 8 dead and dozens more injured. In Brooklyn, New York last week, a man opened fire on a subway train, leaving 10 people shot and others injured in the chaos. While in Sacramento, California, earlier this month, 6 people were killed in gang-related violence that saw more than 100 rounds fired. In the first 4 months of 2022 alone, more than 12,000 people have died from guns in the U.S., a number that includes both homicides and suicides, according to the Gun Violence Archive. The pandemic did little to reduce gun violence in America. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention found that more Americans died of gun-related injuries in 2020, which were 45,222 than in any other year on record. That startling statistic included a record number of gun murders and a near-record amount of suicides. One way to address gun violence, particularly mass shootings, is what's known as threat assessment, which Mark Fullman, the National Affairs Editor for Mother Jones magazine, breaks down in his new book, quote, Trigger Points, unquote. He describes the method of behavioral threat assessment as the tool used to prevent planned attacks, shootings in which the attacker cultivates and plans out the attack over a period of time. Well, that's really the core of the work of threat assessment, is looking at the behaviors and circumstances that led up to those kinds of attacks, of planning, threatening, communications, other forms of behavioral warning signs, and identifying patterns within that to try to then intervene and prevent those kinds of acts from occurring, unquote, Fullman told Yahoo News. Fullman said he started researching mass shootings in 2012 and was startled by the lack of data he could find. It was the same year that a gunman opened fire in an Aurora, Colorado movie theater, leaving 12 dead, including a 6-year-old girl and 70 others injured. In December of that year, another 26 people, 20 of them children, died in a shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Connecticut. Quote, I started analyzing these cases, and within a few months I had started to see a pattern in the cases that there's often a trail of behavioral warning signs that are patterns that are detectable, unquote, said Fullman. He noted that in 2013, U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder, quote, commented on the gathering of the nation's police chiefs that there was a team at the FBI that had stopped more than 100 mass shootings that year. And that just really turned my head. You know, what is that all about? That sounds really thick, unquote. He said mass shootings can be very different in nature, with attacks like New York subway shooting being characterized as ones that are thought about and planned. Quote, there's this popular theme, this idea that these are crazy people who are just snapping and going out and committing an attack like that as if it's an impulsive act. But that's not true at all, and that's not the case, unquote, Fullman said. New York City Mayor Eric Adams, a former police officer who faces difficult challenges, crime surges, released a blueprint in January to address the city's gun issue. Quote, gun violence is a public health crisis that continues to threaten every corner of our city. We pray for all victims of violence and their families who are suffering, but we are going to do more than pray. We're going to turn our pain into purpose. Public safety is my administration's highest priority, which is why we will remove guns from our streets, protect our communities, and create a safe, prosperous, and just city for all New Yorkers, unquote. In California, lawmakers in a state judiciary committee on Tuesday held a hearing on a bill that would allow the state of citizens to sue gun manufacturers for negligent practices. One of the bill's sponsors, Democratic State Assembly member Phil Ting, told the committee, quote, I think it's unfair that the toy industry has a lot more liability than the gun industry, unquote. Nationally, President Biden announced on April 11th that the Department of Justice will crack down on so-called ghost guns, firearms that lack a serial number, are untraceable, and can be assembled at home. The White House said there were approximately 20,000 suspected ghost guns reported to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives last year, which the Biden administration said was a 10-fold increase from 2016 that were recovered by law enforcement during criminal investigations. In trigger points, Fulman said he focused on the pervasive problem of school shootings. In one case, he said a student who was planning a mass shooting was treated with support instead of contempt. Quote, they determined that he's a pretty serious risk, and so what they do is they extend a lot of close personal support to him very quickly. The idea is to be constructive in the prevention work, especially in a school setting, where I think the opportunity to do that is probably in some ways has the greatest potential, unquote. When it comes to addressing mass shootings, he said the biggest tool is threat assessment, and that it's not just up to law enforcement, but a community effort. Quote, how do you catch someone like the New York City subway shooter before it's too late? Here's a guy who, from what we can tell, was living in a pretty serious isolation, was kind of a loner moving around, and yet there were people around him who were unsettled by his behavior. Neighbors that we saw reporting on, family members who were estranged from him. You know, those are the people who are in a position to see warning signs. Then the question becomes, who do they turn to, or where do they know to get help? Well, I was just going to say at the end of this article, I was just going to comment on the fact that, you know, a lot of these people probably have mental problems, and these places like the schools probably don't have enough professionals there to be able to do a job of being able to identify a potential problem before it becomes one. Okay, you know, some schools may just have one or two counselors there who basically are there for the students if they need help. But, you know, I think there needs to be a little bit more than that. I think there needs to be, you know, these professionals there who are updated, you know, or watching the kids, not just staying in their office all day, you know, typing up reports and stuff. I think they need to be out there talking to these kids every fucking day when they see them. You know, they need to be out there and asking them how they're doing. You know, their job is to assess the mental stability of the students. And, you know, listening to rumors about what kid is saying about another is part of that job too. Okay, it's like they have to be investigators all the time. Just assume you've got a student in your school somewhere who is ready to explode and start killing people, and it's your job to find out which one it is. Okay, that's how these counselors have to be. Okay, they're going to have to be investigators. They're going to have to find out what's going on and talk to that individual and assess for themselves if they think this is a problem that's going to explode and they should get outside help. Okay, I think there needs to be a little bit more attention given to, more authority given to the counselors in these schools to be able to do what a lot of schools these days can't do. And I think that's one way to try to, you know, deal with this problem of gun violence. But I also was thinking about the subway shooting and the guy they arrested. It would never, you know, look to me like it was a guy that could actually do something like that. I mean, this fella here, you know, he's what, 60, 61, 62 years old. He looks the most, you know, like the least likely person to just do something like that. You know, it's not a young man like we would expect, okay? Not some guy that looks tough or anything. You know, he looks like, you know, somebody that you'd want to hang around with and talk to. And it's funny that this guy is the one that did all that damage in that subway. I'm like, you know, Jesus, how the hell did this one, you know? And so I have to think that the problem here with this guy was maybe mental stability was gone or something. I don't know. But when they showed him on TV who it was, it's like, no, this can't be him. You know, that was my first reaction. They got the wrong guy. You know, because at first they said he was a suspect, okay? But then they arrested him, and I couldn't believe that. And so I think a lot of people were thinking the same thing. Otherwise, they would be doing this you know, special on the subway shooting, and they'd be showing this guy over and over again, but he's not somebody that's, that you can really build up, sort of a scenario with, like, oh, this is the man, look at him, let's take a look at the mug shots and all that. I think that even the media was kind of let down that the guy didn't look more vicious than he did. I mean, because they were pretty pissed off, as far as the media was concerned, what happened, which, yeah, they were scared. It's, where the news is, I mean, that subway's like right there, So, and then they see who it was, and it's like, well, he's the most, unamusing or he's not the face that's going to sell money, get us money here by plastering him all over the newspapers, because he's very unassuming looking. I mean, he just doesn't look like a killer, So they kind of had to move away from that and just focus on shootings that's happened already this year and build a story up about, why we have such a problem here and what do we need to do to solve it, They really couldn't dramatize this thing any more than it already was. That's that. Gun crimes in this country is going to be a forever problem. It's just never going to end, because nobody wants to or has the ability to put a stop to it. And when a country can't solve its own problems because of whatever reason, then the country is weak and it's losing its strength to be able to deal with its people. There's an interesting story here. This is from military.com, written by Konstantin Toropin, entitled, "After the Supreme Court win, the Navy has reassigned destroyer skipper who refused vaccine." The commander of a Navy destroyer who refused the COVID-19 vaccine and sued the service has been removed from command, according to a court filing in his case. Quote, "On Monday, April 11th, instead of getting underway with his ship, Navy commander was temporarily reassigned for 60 days under a new Navy policy that prohibits unvaccinated personnel from going underway on a Navy ship," unquote, a declaration from the officer's lawyer reported to the court. The commander, along with more than 30 unnamed officers and enlisted personnel from all the military branches, sued the military over the vaccine mandate in November of 2021 in a federal court in Florida. Since then, his case, along with one filed by the Navy SEALs in Texas, touched off a legal debate about how much power the military has to enforce the vaccine mandate and the nature of the religious exemption process. Judge Steve Merriday, who was presiding over the commander's case, ruled in early February that, for the sake of preservation of the status quo, while the suit is being decided, the Navy was barred from reassigning or demoting the commander. A second order, reaffirming and lengthening the term of the injunction, followed on February 18th. The order set off a series of filings from the service that argued the order forcing it to keep an officer who refused to take the vaccine in a place of command, quote, "indefinitely sidelines a Navy warship," unquote. However, on March the 25th, the Supreme Court ruled that the Navy is allowed to make its own decisions about whether to deploy sailors who refused the coronavirus vaccine. On March 30, quote, "following the Supreme Court's lead," unquote, the Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit stayed Merriday's injunction. Since that time, neither the Navy nor the Justice Department, which has been handling the messaging for the case, would say if the commander had in fact been reassigned. Legal filings say the officer, who is not identified in the lawsuit, joined the Navy in 2004 and now has, quote, "nearly 18 years in the service," unquote. Other documents filed by the Navy showed that the destroyer he commanded is based in Norfolk, Virginia, and belongs to Destroyer Squadron 26. According to the complaint, the commander filed a religious accommodation request in September of 2021, but was denied a month later. He appealed it in November. The Navy tried to remove the man from the post, but according to court documents, it wasn't over the accommodation request for his refusal to get the vaccine. The commanding officer's boss, Captain Frank Brandon, told the court that the Navy's objection to keeping the skipper in place was over his disregard for policies designed to protect his own crew. Brandon testified to 2 incidents that made him lose faith in the commander's ability to lead the destroyer. The first incident happened in early November when, according to Brandon, the commander gave a briefing to roughly 50 to 60 personnel in shoulder-to-shoulder proximity, despite the fact that, quote, he could barely speak, unquote. When Brandon questioned the commander in his cabin, the man concealed that he had a sore throat but blamed it on a jog in the cold air. The unvaccinated commander was ordered to get a COVID-19 test, which came back positive. The second incident occurred 3 months later in early February 2022. According to Brandon, the commander told him he needed to take leave, but failed to tell his boss that he was leaving the Norfolk area, quote, in order to testify in this litigation, unquote. This was not only a breach of Navy travel policy amid the pandemic, but a breach of trust as well, he said. Quote, my loss of confidence in the ship's commander is not based on his vacation status or his denied request for a religious exemption, unquote, Brandon wrote in the filing. Quote, it is based on the fact that I cannot trust his judgment. I cannot trust him to look after the welfare of his sailors, and I cannot trust him to be honest with me, unquote. A service policy published in November of 2021 notes that, quote, Navy service members who are not vaccinated, regardless of exemption status, may be temporarily reassigned with concurrence of the first flag officer in the administrative chain of command based on operational readiness and mission requirements, unquote. I still say that if the president himself issues a mandate that people in the military have to be vaccinated, and it makes sense, perfect sense to me. I mean, you want your military ready at all times, okay? You know, look what's happening right now with Russia and Ukraine. Okay, we could be dragged into that fight at any time. So do you want your service members to be ready or sick to death with COVID-19? So when your president tells the military to take a vaccine, it should be required, just like when you go to boot camp and they line you up to take all these vaccinations when you're standing in line. Nobody bitches about that. Not one. I think I was 3 or 4 shots I got in just this arm right here to get vaccinations for a plethora of things, okay? Because you're going to be sent all over the world, so you got to be vaccinated for a lot of different things, okay? I didn't hear anybody raise their hand and said, I want religious exemption from this. Not one. Nobody said a fucking word like that. They all took the shots, okay? The only thing we bitched about was, oh, it hurts, you know, my arm's sore now. That was it. Not a word was said about, you know, oh, we're getting vaccinations. I don't agree with that, you know. No, nobody played the sissy card, okay? So, this going on here is like, you know, whew, what the hell's happened to the service when they allow the fucking people to deny a vaccination, okay? It's only protecting yourself and protecting anybody else that's around you, because you're going to be asked to do things that, you know, the rest of us can't do. All right. I mean, if there's anybody that we want to be ready, is the people who protect us, right? I mean, let's bring this down to a lower level here for some people out there who can't understand me. Imagine if all your superheroes at the Justice League were all sick with COVID, and yet Darkseid comes down to try to take over the planet. Are you going to sit there and say, well, they have a right not to take a vaccination? Or are you going to say, where the fuck didn't they get ready for that? So that way when this happened, they'd be ready to fight, you know? Think about it. Same goddamn thing. The people who we depend on to protect us and even to help us, like people who drive the ambulances, or people who fly our airplanes and you know, or choppers and stuff like that to rescue people, like, you know, or the Coast Guard. These people have to be, you know, functional. Okay, they have to be functional, and for people to get all squeamish and say, oh, the government's trying to poison us, they're trying to put chips in our bodies and stuff like that, and for people to, you know, who are in the military, allowing themselves to be suckered by that, and then allowed to, okay, if you don't want to take it, don't take it, you know. No, I'm sorry. If I was president, that wouldn't fly. Okay, you either take it or you're out. Take the vaccine or you're out. You're not going to get any benefits from being in service. I don't care how long you're in. If you don't take it, you're out. Dishonorable discharge. Because the president issued an order and you defied it. I'm not even going to have a goddamn court-martial. You know, just kick them out. So, you know, like I said, there's people in you know, who have the luxury of denying whether they should take it or not. That's your civilians, okay? As sick as that is, these people can do that shit and get away with it, depending on if they're working at a job where, you know, where they need to be vaccinated. Like if they're in the hospital, okay, these people are going to be required to be vaccinated if they're going to help patients who are sick with it. You don't want your nurse or your doctor to get sick and die, you know, while you're being treated by them, right? I mean, that's not good. So, you know, there's a certain level of allowance given to civilians, but when you're talking about people, critical personnel, you know, in our country, who we look to, you know, be there for us when the country is down, you know, they don't have the luxury of saying no, okay? I'm sorry. Like I said a long time back, when you join the service, certain rights you give up. As a citizen, when you become a serviceman, that changes everything, okay? And you need to know that before you sign up to be in the military, that there's certain things that you're not going to have when you become a serviceman that you have as a citizen, okay? And a lot of times I think people blend the two like it's the same thing, and it's not, okay? These are two worlds that are designed to be separate, okay? The military has always ran its affairs different from, you know, society, and that's just the way it is. I don't know why it's that way or why it's allowed to stay that way, but it just is. I think people have, by and large, all agreed that the military should run its own affairs, okay, and manage its people that way, in order to ensure that there's discipline, and that these people are prepared at all times to be asked to, you know, get up and do something, okay? Whether it's to go to war or to aid in something, you know, whatever. That we really can't be lax. You know, there's a lot of militaries in the world that are lax. They let their troops do all kinds of stupid things like civilians would, okay, and they don't care, okay? I mean, the Russian military is like that. You know, they're in the military, but they don't seem to act like they're in the military. They do whatever the hell they want and everything, and, you know, so we try to keep our military and our civilian life separate, okay? And it seems to work. But in this case here, the discipline just wasn't strong enough to keep these people from doing something dumb, which was to deny a vaccination, which, you know, in days to come, when people join the service, you're going to get a COVID vaccination shot whether you want it or not, okay? Because, you know, we're going to be dealing with this thing for decades. Thanks to people who don't want to get vaccinated, we're always going to be dealing with this. So from now on, when people join the service, guess what kind of shot you're going to get, okay? And you're not going to be able to say, I don't want it, because you're going to sign on the form that you're going to accept all vaccinations, okay? And if you don't want to get that, you shouldn't sign your name to it, and you shouldn't join the service. Simple as that. But from now on, people joining the military, they're going to get the COVID shot. You're going to be required to get it, because they're going to need you to be ready when you're called on. Because like I said, here we have this, who would have thought before the pandemic there was going to be a war in Ukraine, okay? And we could be looking at sending American troops down there at some point or wherever, you know? So, like I said, it's one of those things where we have to keep our servicemen prepared, all right? And I know a lot of people just don't trust the government, depending on who the president is, you know, I don't know. But the fact is that you need to weigh your trust of the government against the health of your military that's there to protect you, okay? Which do you want to see come to be? You want your military to be ready when bad times happen, okay? Or do you want to be able to just trust your government, your president, your senator, whoever the hell it is that you're ass kissing, okay? Is that more important to you than your military being healthy enough to be able to protect you? You know, come on. It should be common sense to anybody in the service what their duty requires of them, okay? Look, I'm a veteran, for Christ's sake, and I know better. All right, I got the whole plethora of fucking vaccinations, and I'm going to take the rest of them when they have more of them. Okay, I'm still walking. I ain't dead yet. Okay, I don't hear music from the radio in my head. There ain't no chip circulating around in my body. Besides, they wouldn't need to do that anyway. That would be old-fashioned. They don't need a chip in your body to find out where the hell you are. Christ. Everybody's walking around with a chip on their body, and it's called a cell phone. Okay, you keep that thing on, and they'll find you. Okay, they make the cell phone a nice little toy to play with, but it's also a tracker. Okay, but I don't see anybody giving up their cell phones because, oh, you're intruding my privacy on my privacy. You know, no, they love their friggin' cell phones. They want to keep them. All right. Who's any Republican out there throwing away your cell phone because they're tracking you? So all that bullshit about a chip in your body is all bullcrap, and that's all it is. Okay? Christ. Even modern cars these days can be tracked. They're all connected to the internet. I mean, look at truckers today. The people that are shipping our stuff. Have you ever looked inside of a cab of a modern-day 18-wheeler these days? It looks like you're walking into the space shuttle. They got more goddamn computers in that fucking thing than I ever saw, okay? And one of the reasons why is so their boss can know where they are, what they're doing, okay, and whether they're goofing off or actually driving, okay? So people, remember the old days where you used to take a clipboard and you'd fill out what you're doing, at what time you gassed up and all that? They don't trust the truckers to be honest anymore on those reports, so they're doing it themselves at their office. They want to know where Mr. Joe Blow is at. They type his name up, and it comes up on a fucking monitor where he's at, and if he's moving or sitting somewhere doing nothing. You can't get away with nothing. That's why there's a lot of people who burn out driving trucks for companies these days, because when you give your boss that kind of ability to know when and what you're doing, then you don't have any leeway in order to know when you've done too much or you're not feeling well, because they're not going to care, and they're just going to say, well, if you can't do this, then you're fired. I'm going to find somebody who can replace you. You know, before there used to be this little bit of a more rope given to drivers to be able to fudge a little bit on the facts in order to protect themselves from being looked at as incompetent. Now they can't. That's why today it's a bad idea to be a truck driver, because you've got no choice. You know, they do exactly what they tell you, and if you don't, you're out of a job, you know. Okay, well, that's pretty much all for today. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their weekend or week, and I will hopefully meet you all again. Have some other things to talk about, so please keep your ears open on local COVID-19 news, because there have been spikes in the country in different states of people getting infected, and that's probably because a lot of people are assuming that they don't really need to wear their mask as much anymore, which, depending on what you believe, is either a bad thing or, you know, whatever. Personally, I'm not ready to say that the pandemic is over, so I'm still wearing my mask as you know, as people were required to. You know, I think that's the best thing to do until we hear better news about it. Okay, so like I said, just keep your ears open to local news. Subscribe, comment. Appreciate any comments you have, and I will talk to you later. So take care, everybody. Bye-bye.